Hello, welcome to this week's sermon. This week's sermon is a sermon for the 11th of June 2023, which will be the 10th in Ordinary Time, Year A. The readings are Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 9, the call of Abraham, and Matthew 9, verses 9 to 13, and verses 18 to 26. That will be the call of Matthew and the woman in the crowd that touches the cloak of Jesus and Jairus' daughter. Did they laugh at Abraham when he arrived in Canaan? "Follow me," he said. "God is leading us on." It was like a scene out of Dad's Army when Captain Mannering led his troops along the beach and promptly disappeared in a deep hole cut by the outgoing tide. 300 or so of his clansmen went with Abraham, according to Jewish tradition. When he got there was a famine, and he had to go and beg for supplies in Egypt. Did the Canaanites laugh? Did his family laugh? Or couldn't they see the funny side? Sarah would laugh when God said she was going to have a baby. They laughed at Jesus too, some of them. The Pharisees found it confounding that a holy man would eat at Matthew's house with other sinners. The people mourning Jairus' daughter laughed at Jesus when he told them that she was sleeping. Perhaps they laughed at her father for going to Jesus in the first place. What a harebrained scheme to go and fall at the feet of a carpenter's son when his daughter was on the point of leaving this world. What about the woman in the crowd who had been a medical outcast for 12 years? I wonder if anyone would have laughed at her if she had told them that she was going to try to get near enough to Jesus to touch his cloak in the hope of a cure. People do laugh at Jesus. Few laugh for long, but it is one reaction Jesus elicits. Presumably, those mourning the dead girl stopped laughing at Jesus when the girl came back to life. Presumably, they stopped laughing at the desperate woman when she found her healing. And presumably, those who queried Jesus' choice of disciple would have stopped laughing if they had stuck around long enough to see what Matthew was able to do in the service of the kingdom. Matthew's gospel quickly became the favourite gospel in the early church for teaching the faith. Although we don't like the idea of people laughing at our religious faith, we can see why they are tempted to do so if we just stand back for a moment and look at ourselves. Abraham and Sarah had good reason to think God was promising more than he could deliver. They were both past childbearing age. But this is the whole point. This way, because the promise is so unbelievable by human means, it takes on a spiritual, divine significance when they do have a baby. It is much more clearly the work of God when it defies human reason. Did they laugh at Abraham's naive and foolish faith that he could take his family on a trek, leaving everything they had ever known and owned behind them, in the expectation that a whole new country would simply drop into their lap? How many of us would up sticks and take pregnant women, newborn babies and aged aunties along to a place that we've never seen to set up home afresh? Well, human migration has always taken place, and modern New Zealand has been founded on pioneers doing what Abraham did. Indeed, the first Maori visitors to this land who settled this land, they too were migrants in their day too, coming from afar and settling in a new place. It's just what Abraham did. But it's taking a big chance. We remember the success stories of migrations, but I wonder how many would-be migrants met with disaster. It certainly looked like a disaster when Abraham arrived in Canaan to face a famine. Their later success only underscores the belief that God was with them, helping them. Abraham and Sarah were refugees in both countries, remember. Abraham had gone from Ur of the Chaldees because he'd upset the local potentate Nimrod by smashing all the statues of the gods in his father's shop. Haran had been a stopping place en route to Canaan. Now they'd completed the journey and got to Canaan and met with disaster, a famine. And so they'd become refugees again in Egypt, looking for supplies there. At any point, Abraham could have lost faith in God and turned for home again and taken his chances back in Ur, where he had upset the local potentate Nimrod. If he had done so, many of his contemporaries would have said that Abraham was regaining his common sense. His faith had filled his head with fantastic, ridiculous ideas. That's what they would have said. But Abraham saw things through to the end and found his perseverance rewarded. Matthew was taking a huge risk too when he abandoned his lucrative employment as a tax collector and joined Jesus' itinerant band of disciples who were dependent on local hospitality and the financial support of a handful of well-placed women. If Matthew had stayed at his counting desk, many would have said he was being sensible. Matthew bequeathed his gospel to the world because he didn't play safe. He took a chance on Jesus. If the woman with the issue of blood had lost confidence when confronted by the crowds following Jesus and had changed her mind about pushing through the throng in order to touch the tassels of his robe, friends would have comforted her by the thought that nothing would have been gained anyway by taking such a risky and embarrassing public step. The woman found her healing because she persisted and took a risk on Jesus, not worrying about what the crowds might have said about her. If Jairus had given up when his daughter died, that would have been the sensible thing to do. No one would have reproached him, and he wouldn't have had to risk getting offside with members of the synagogue and the Pharisees by parading his desperation and humiliatingly prostrating himself before Jesus. In Mark's version, Jairus' daughter is still alive, but at the point of death. Whilst asking for Jesus' help, news arrives of his daughter's death. His friends tell Jairus to not bother Jesus any further. In Luke's version, the girl was said to be alive, but dying. In Matthew's version, however, that we've had today, Jairus says that his daughter has just died. If this is the correct version, and Jairus knew his daughter was already dead before he even went to Jesus, it is even more remarkable that he should continue his quest on her behalf. Jairus didn't give up on his daughter, even in the face of death, and took a risk that Jesus could and would bring her to life again. Have we the persistence in faith to keep on, keeping on? When we take a punt on Jesus, there are plenty of people around us who would question whether we have lost our senses. We will face many hurdles and obstacles. Life will kick us in the teeth from time to time. So, will we give up on Jesus when disaster strikes? When we get to the end of the road, for the church as a whole, Methodist Church of New Zealand as a whole, or just for this parish? When we get to the end of the road, will we give up and die, or look for a new road? Promises of blessing may seem as empty as Canaan appeared to Abraham when he arrived. Churches squabble and fall far short of their calling in all manner of indefensible ways. And churches also grow old and die. Are these signs that we should give up on God? Following Jesus may take us away from our place of comfort and security, from what we know, or deprive us of worldly prosperity. It's a huge risk to take, to leave all of that behind, just for the sake of Jesus. Would we cling to our counting table, or take a risk on following Jesus? Sometimes it really looks as if it is truly over and done with. Our hopes are as dead as Jairus' daughter. Common sense seems to call us to give up. Einstein's words are quoted at us far more frequently than the Bible's words are sometimes. To continue to do the same thing and expect a different outcome is a sign of insanity. So the words go. Give it up. Pack it in, they say. Jairus didn't give up. He was right not to do so. The Einstein quotation is often heard, but its irony is seldom understood. Because according to quantum physics, and I haven't got time to explain all this now, but according to quantum physics, you can do the same thing over and over again until you get a different result. That is why it is theoretically possible to throw a tennis ball through a wall. That's right, it is theoretically possible, according to quantum physics, to throw a tennis ball through a wall. It's just that it would take so many throws, none of us would probably live to see it. So, likewise, we may not live to see better days for the church. Does that mean we should give up? Or should we keep on throwing the ball against the wall? Because with each throw, the next time might not bounce back. That is the question facing our parish as we look ahead and try and decide whether we ought to develop the next door site and pour a lot of money into a future that we may not live to see. Indeed, it is a future that is not guaranteed will come at all. Do we keep on keeping on? Later this year, we in New Zealand will get to choose another set of politicians to be our government. Whatever disappointments we've had in the past, we will lay them aside and keep on doing what we always do, and cast our vote for the next lot to have a go. We do this because we cannot just give up. Someone has to run the country, and democracy is the best way we have come up with so far, even if it doesn't always work very well. It's just better than all the other ways, as Churchill once observed. Our readings today are urging us to go again with Jesus. Disappointed expectations may litter our path, as they did for Abraham. We may have to turn our back on other alternative choices for our lives, like Matthew. We may have to go with Jesus again, despite what family or friends or society may think of us for doing so, like the woman who forced her way through the crowd to cure her intimate problem. We may have to turn to Jesus because he is simply our last hope, as it was for Jairus. But whatever the degree of risk or cost or need, we come to Jesus because he has demonstrated through Abraham, Jairus, Matthew, and the woman in the crowd, that however crazy it may look to the world, going with Jesus is actually our best bet. Amen.